Alright, hello. So, recently I was watching an interview with Idols. The title of the video is How Kenny Beats and Idols Almost Broke Nigel Godrich on Pop Pop Pop. So, they talk about tape loops and stuff like that, but also how the main chords and melody were made with feedback, which I thought was really cool. And I've seen some other videos on like feedback loops and stuff like that, and I just thought I'd give it a go. You know, this video is not going to be like a pop version of feedback loops or like rock version, of feedback loops like it was with Idols. We're just going to make some crazy sounds and they fit more into the kind of glitch music or computer music genres, I guess. So before we get into the video, I do want to say that because this is like a quick tutorial, I didn't really go into like using it really intentionally. I just thought to show the kind of starting points with feedback loops and what you can get from doing really basic stuff with feedback loops. There's some really cool like percussion sounds that come from it, and we don't chop them up or anything, we just do the feedback loops and resample them. But I just want to mention that because when you're watching this video, I kind of want you to think about it like it's the starting point for your sound design, and then you can go on later and chop up your feedback loops and edit them some more before we get into it. I'd like to say thank you to my Patreon members. As of recording, there's quite a few of you now, and it's really cool. And you know, the kind of group chat that we have is kind of starting to be talked in more, and we're sharing music and stuff like that, and I don't know, it's really nice, and I don't know, it's really fun. So I just want to thank you all for being part of that, also just supporting me immensely, because that really means a lot, and there are some of you who've been there for quite some time now, and I really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you very much. And if you're not a Patreon member, that's cool, but I'd highly recommend it because there are some cool people in the chat, and there are some, if I say so myself, some pretty cool things on my Patreon, like sample packs and samples, max patches and devices and weird stuff. There's also Patreon exclusive videos, mainly focused around IDM, but I'm thinking of branching out into some more abstract stuff because, you know, I don't have to worry about the algorithm on there. So yeah, if you're not a part of my Patreon, I'd highly recommend it because this video also came out a week earlier. But you know, if you can't be or don't want to be a member of my Patreon, that's cool. You just watching this video is really helping out the channel too. And recently, you know, the channel's been doing quite well. I mean, we're on 6,500 subscribers now, so thank you so much for that. Everyone who's subscribed, I really appreciate that. That's nuts. So yeah, thank you. And again, you just watching this video, leaving a like, a comment, or any other way you can interact with it, that really helps, and I still really appreciate that. So yeah, alright, let's just get into it and make some weird, glitchy feedback loops. Alright, so first off, we need to grab something to excite our feedback loops. So I'm grabbing an operator and putting the ADSR to as short as it can go and changing my oscillator to white noise. Then I'm just going to drag that into a MIDI clip. And now I'm going to completely send it into our reverb track. And then send the reverb track back into itself. And this is kind of like a very basic feedback loop. As you can hear, we've already got some pretty cool stuff, you know, very metallic sounding percussion. But before we go any further, I'm going to chuck a limiter on the master and put it to like -6 dB. And for a laugh, let's chuck OTT on there as well. I should mention, you don't have to have your exciter in a loop. In fact, it's probably better to just trigger it as and when you want it. But for some reason I didn't do that, so I do apologise. If you go into your reverb now, changing the parameters of the effect will completely change your sound. So let's change the decay and the size. And now we've really got some cool metallic percussion stuff going on. Let's also bring in the chorus, chuck the rate up a bunch, do the same with our spin. And now we've got like these weird alien-ish rises. Attenuating the volume or the send will also completely change how it sounds. I'm sure you've probably realised that by now, but yeah, keep that in mind as well. Alright, now we should send our reverb feedback loop into our delay and then create a feedback loop with the delay by sending it back into the reverb and also into itself. So we've got reverb going into delay and reverb going into reverb, and then we've got delay going into reverb and delay going into delay. And it gets pretty loud and messy and quite chaotic, to be honest. I think that was pretty cool. Let's bring in an LFO now and chuck that onto our reverb channel. And then let's map our LFO to, say, the size. Let's attenuate that a little bit, so bring down the modulation. And also let's change it from sine to stray. Personally, it's my favourite LFO algorithm in Ableton. And then we're just going to map some more stuff in the little mapping menu. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Oh my god. Alright. I mean, you could use that for a riser or something, I guess. Anyway, we're going to bring in another channel now. Set it to resampling, and now we can record this. A couple of things to note here. First of all, as you can see, I'm kind of playing the faders. If you have a MIDI controller, I'd heavily recommend doing that, because that can kind of completely change the sound that you get from your feedback loop. And secondly, for some reason, whenever I would resample anything in this video, OBS would really lag, so I apologise for how jittery and laggy it is when I am resampling something. Anyway, we can also modulate it with an expression control, which has all these modulation sources. So we'll chuck that onto our MIDI channel, which has our exciter on. I'm just going to set all of our sources to random. And then I'm going to map it to stuff. As you can see there, I did it to the volume of the return channels. So, you know, that kind of intention you could have with playing, we no longer have, because I thought that would be fun. Why not, right? Also, changing the delay from sync to just time and modulating the time of each delay. Hopefully then we'll get some really interesting stuff going on in stereo. Especially if they're really different delay times. And we have. Thank God for that limiter, right? You can also do a little bit more melodic stuff like this. I wouldn't really say melodic. But we've got spectral resonator, spectral blur, vocoder, and a resonator. So I'm just going to take you through each bit here.
Yeah.
Sounds very alien, especially when we turn on the spectral blur. And then I'm using the vocoder to take off some of that high end. It sounds very 90s. I don't know, for some reason, I could hear this being in like a nu metal album. Like Korn or Mudvayne. Definitely Mudvayne. LD50 with all the weird alien noises. But yeah, you can get some pretty cool alien, I wouldn't say melodic, maybe more atonal stuff, but it's not just noise, you know? Or you could just double up on resonators, and then when you excite it, we get the chord from the resonators, and then like a feedback as if the chord is going through an amp. Anyway, with that, I'm then going to send that into a hybrid reverb with the shimmer algorithm. I think that sounds really nice. And again, I'm playing the faders, and that's kind of... I wouldn't say it's like an amp envelope, but you can kind of control what's happening and when, but not too much control. There is still some computer element to it, if that makes sense. Hybrid Reverb also has that vintage parameter, which I don't know why it pitch shifted the chord when I changed it, but cool. Secondly, it creates a noise, which then we don't need an exciter, or we don't need our old exciter, because the reverb is its own exciter. Because it's producing a noise, and then when sending it back into itself, it works just on its own, if that makes sense. Anyway, this is my favourite bit. We're doing a feedback loop with raw. In case you haven't used raw before, it is a distortion, a compression, a multiband compressor. It's great. And we are using the multiband function on it. And what's really cool is that down here, it has its own feedback. So we're sending an exciter into a device with its own feedback and then feedbacking back into itself. I could have worded that better. I'm going to forewarn you, this one gets pretty full on and quite stupid, but you can get some good material from it. Already, that's cool. Now, as I said in the intro, because this is just a little tutorial, I didn't go ahead and do some really in-depth editing on the material we get from the feedback loops, but this is just the start. You can make a feedback loop and then change the sample in Composer's desktop project, or I don't know, just mess around with it in Ableton. But this is a great way to get source material. And that dispersion filter on our mid channel is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but it's also kind of silly. It sounds like someone going woo 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 woo. What's really fun as well is that we are modulating the LFO1 speed with itself. As you can see, it's kind of going from quite fast and then ramping down because it's modulating itself. I don't know, I just find that very fun to do. But in my opinion, we're getting some kind of cool, maybe Neuro DMB bass sounds. I don't know, I don't make drum and bass. I might be way off the mark there. But anyway, as you can see, I'm not particularly thinking too much about what I'm doing. I'm just modulating stuff, picking distortions, picking filters, and hoping for the best, which is kind of the fun of a feedback loop in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, you can be a lot more intentional with it. I love that. The noise distortion or noise injection or whatever, it completely widens the signal from raw. So we get quite a nice wide stereo effect to our feedback loop. Again, I know this sounds silly, but one, it's fun to do silly, stupid things. And two, you can be more intentional with it. And we end up with this. I love it. You can, if you were to chop that up, you can get some pretty cool electronic percussion sounds, which I have done. But anyway, yeah, I love it. I think it sounds weirdly organic, if that makes sense. Christ, that's loud. Yeah, all those crackles and pops, and I mean, there sounds like there could be like toms in there. We don't chop it up in this video, but you could. I think that sounds great. And again, we don't chop it up in this video, but imagine if you picked out little slices of this. I am going to grab, not a looper, oops, I'm going to grab some beat repeats, because, I mean, it's pretty chaotic sounding at the minute. But with a beat repeat, we can force it to the grid and be a bit more rhythmical, or rhythmic. As you can see, I've put them on the master, but in a minute I take all of our beat repeats and just put them, oh yeah, just then, put them onto the feedback loop instead, because then you're sending the beat repeats back into the beat repeats, which ends up sounding really fun. But as you can hear, we're getting a lot more percussive sounds now, as it's being forced to the grid, which I think sounds really cool. So yeah, I'm just going to I'm going to make some more beat repeats, set them all to ins so we don't have it mixed in with the original feedback loop. It's just going straight beat repeat and that's all we hear. But I think it imitates intention. Again, we could chop this up and make it purposeful, but, you know, it's a small tutorial. And making stupid, silly sounds to then work with later, I think is the best thing to do. And then we're going to resample it. Like that! Did you hear that? It sounded like a sweeping bass. That was great! And as you can see, we're sending this into the reverb, and then sending the reverb back into raw. And we've only got raw soloed at the minute, so we're getting the feedbacked, distorted reverb, if that makes sense. Yeah, that kind of swooping bass, that sounds great. And for a laugh, we're going to grab drum synth, kick and snare, do a 4 on the floor with the kick, 2 and 4 with the snare. It's dumb, but it's fun. Also going to sidechain our feedback loop to the drum synth kick. See, that sounds cool. Don't get me wrong, if you were to like play this live, it would clear out the room. I don't think many people would like this. But you know, it's fun. And then just grabbing a hi-hat loop. Again, small effort, but it is fun sounding. I've also sped it up and set our resampling sample to warp with repitch. Oh my god. That sounds great. And this is one I made earlier. This one has a few more beat repeats on it with pitch decay, which ended up sounding quite 303-ish. Let's hear how that sounds with the drums too. Also got beat repeats on the master. Forgot to mention that, my bad. So yeah, that's about it from me. This video was pretty stupid, but again, like I've mentioned, this is just a start. This is where you get your source material. I think it's great. There's a lot of stuff in feedback loops where I wouldn't have thought, oh, I'm going to make this today. And even if I wanted to, half the time I don't think it would sound this good. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Follow me on my other socials, TikTok and Instagram, because I'm, trendy. And yeah, alright, I'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next one. Bye.